My brother made my life a living hell, betrayed me by getting my wife pregnant, and ended up disowned by our parents. Now, after they left me their $2 million inheritance, he's suddenly begging for my help like nothing ever happened. I never thought the person who would destroy my life would be my own brother. It sounds dramatic when I say it out loud, but it's the truth. This wasn't some petty argument or sibling rivalry. This was betrayal in its rawest, ugliest form. My brother wasn't just a part of my family. He was someone I had defended all my life, someone I'd sacrificed for when no one else would. And yet, he's the one who tore my world apart. He made my life hell, broke my trust, and crossed the one line that no one ever should. He got my wife pregnant. Even now, I still struggle to process it. You grow up believing that family means protection, that blood means loyalty. You think no matter what happens, your brother has your back. But the truth is, sometimes the person standing closest to you is the one holding the knife. It started long before I even realized it. Small moments that didn't seem important back then. Little arguments, silent competitions, the kind of tension that builds slowly until it's too late to stop it. I was always the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who cleaned up after his messes. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe by saving him over and over again, I taught him that he could destroy anything and I'd still be there to fix it. I thought I was doing the right thing, being a good brother, but looking back, I was just setting myself up to be his next casualty. If someone had told me years ago that Adam, the brother I'd grown up with, laughed with, trusted, would one day be the reason I lost everything I loved, I would have laughed in their face. But betrayal has a cruel way of showing you who people really are. It still feels unreal saying it out loud, like a nightmare I keep waking up from but can't escape. Even after everything that's happened, a part of me still can't believe it's real. You spend your whole life thinking family means safety, that your brother is supposed to be your first friend, not your first enemy. But the truth is, sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who tear you apart from the inside. After I found out what he did, I kept replaying every moment in my head, every joke we shared, every time I had his back when no one else did. I used to look at Adam and think, no matter how reckless or selfish he got, he'd never truly hurt me. I was wrong. Looking back, I can see the warning signs, but back then, I was blind to them. I didn't want to believe that my brother, the guy I'd defended since childhood, the one I'd covered for when he got into trouble, could ever do something so cruel. Maybe that's what hurts the most. It wasn't just betrayal, it was disbelief. I couldn't understand how he could look me in the eyes, call me his brother, laugh with me, eat dinner with me, all while hiding something that would destroy my life. It's like he lived a double life right under my roof, and I was too naive to see it. I remember lying awake at night, trying to convince myself it couldn't be true, that maybe I was overthinking, that maybe it was all just some terrible misunderstanding. But deep down, I think I already knew the truth. It's just that when betrayal comes from blood, your heart refuses to believe what your gut already knows. My brother Adam was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who somehow always managed to charm his way out of any situation. Our parents adored him, even when he messed up again and again. I was the opposite, the quiet one, the one who kept things together, the one who cleaned up the wreckage he left behind. But family makes you blind. It makes you see through love instead of truth. I kept telling myself he would change, that one day he'd finally grow up and appreciate everything people did for him. I believed that so much that I ignored how selfish he really was. When he lost his job, I didn't hesitate to offer him a place to stay. Emily, my wife, wasn't thrilled about it, but she agreed because she knew how much family meant to me. I thought having Adam stay with us would help him get back on his feet. I thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't know I was inviting chaos into my home. At first, everything seemed fine. He'd sleep late, eat my food, borrow my things without asking, but I brushed it off because he was my brother. Slowly, though, I started to notice things that didn't sit right. The way Emily laughed a little too hard at his jokes, how his compliments lingered too long, how he always seemed to be around her when I wasn't. I pushed the thoughts away because I didn't want to be that jealous husband who suspects everyone. But something inside me was uneasy, whispering that something wasn't right. I didn't listen. I trusted them both, and that trust would become the biggest mistake of my life, the crack that let everything I loved fall apart. The night everything started to crumble, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, except for the sound of laughter coming from the living room. It was soft at first, then louder, the kind of laugh that's shared between people who are a little too comfortable with each other. When I walked in, I saw them sitting close together on the couch, their faces lit up by the dim glow of the TV. Emily's smile faded the second she saw me, and Adam leaned back casually, pretending like nothing was wrong. But I saw it. The tension. The guilt written all over her face and the smugness hiding in his. My heart dropped, but I forced a smile and asked what was so funny. They both mumbled something about a show, but I could feel the air in that room shift. That moment stuck with me. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things, that maybe they were just being friendly. But deep down, a voice kept whispering that something wasn't right. Over the next few days, little things began to pile up, Emily acting distant, Adam being overly helpful, the way conversations stopped the moment I entered the room. I felt like a stranger in my own home. I remember one night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that I was just stressed, that maybe I was being paranoid. But there's a point where your instincts scream too loudly to ignore. I didn't know it yet, but that night on the couch wasn't just an uncomfortable coincidence. It was the first visible crack in a wall that had already started collapsing. I just didn't realize how deep the betrayal ran or how completely it would destroy everything I thought was real. A few weeks after that night, things started to feel off in a way I couldn't explain. Emily wasn't the same anymore. She used to greet me at the door with a smile, ask about my day, make little jokes to lighten the mood. Now she barely looked at me. Her laughter felt forced, her touches were fewer, and her eyes, those warm eyes I once adored, seemed distant, almost guilty. Adam, on the other hand, acted overly nice, which made everything worse. He'd offer to cook, to help with chores, to run errands with Emily. It was strange because Adam was never the helpful type. He was the kind of person who avoided effort unless there was something in it for him. I kept telling myself they were just trying to get along. I didn't want to see the truth. I wanted to believe my home was still a safe place, that the woman I loved would never betray me and that my brother had finally grown up. But the tension was becoming unbearable. There were hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room, random excuses when I asked questions, and sudden mood changes that made no sense. One night, I walked into the kitchen and found them standing way too close, whispering. When they noticed me, Emily jumped back like she'd been caught doing something wrong, and Adam quickly changed the subject. My chest tightened, and I wanted to confront them, but I didn't have proof. I didn't want to accuse them of something so horrible without being sure. So I kept it inside, pretending everything was fine while my gut screamed otherwise. I told myself love and family meant trust, but deep down, a storm was brewing that I wasn't ready to face. Then came the night that ripped away any illusion I had left. I remember it so clearly because it was the night everything I thought I knew about my life shattered. Emily had been quiet all day, distant in a way that made my stomach twist. I came home from work earlier than usual, hoping maybe we could talk, maybe fix whatever was drifting between us. The house was too quiet. The lights were dim, and I could hear muffled sounds from the living room. My heart was already racing before I even saw anything. And when I walked in, I froze. There they were, sitting close together on the couch again, Adam's hand brushing against hers, both of them looking startled like kids caught doing something they knew was wrong. The air went heavy, and for a second, no one moved. Emily's face turned pale, her eyes wide and trembling, while Adam just leaned back with that smug, infuriating smirk I'd come to hate. I didn't explode, not right away. I just asked, "What's going on here?" Emily stammered something about watching TV, but her voice cracked. Adam shrugged, like I was overreacting. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I wanted to believe them, wanted to think I was imagining everything, but the guilt on her face told me otherwise. I walked away that night with a hollow feeling in my chest, knowing deep down that something had already broken between us. Later, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was all in my head. But denial is a dangerous thing. It makes you ignore the truth even when it's screaming in your face. That night was the beginning of the end, and deep down, I think I already knew it. Weeks passed, but the tension in the air only grew thicker. Every small argument between Emily and me turned into something bigger, something darker, as if there were invisible cracks forming beneath the surface of our marriage. I tried to hold on, tried to remind myself of the woman I once loved, the woman who laughed at my stupid jokes and made me feel like I mattered. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone distant, distracted, always checking her phone or working late. My instinct screamed that something was wrong, but my heart refused to accept it. I started noticing small things, the way she'd flinch when Adam's name came up, how she'd disappear for hours without explanation, and how her smiles had turned hollow. I even tried to talk to her one evening, sitting across from her at dinner, asking if everything was all right between us. She didn't even look up. "I'm just tired," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. I wanted to believe her, but a part of me knew she wasn't just tired, she was done. The thought of losing her terrified me, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that she'd already slipped away, that I was just holding on to the ghost of what we used to be. I buried myself in work, hoping distraction would numb the pain, but every night when I came home to that cold silence, it hurt all over again. Then, one evening, I saw Adam's car parked down the street from our house. My chest tightened as I watched it from the window, headlights off, engine running. He stayed there for almost an hour before driving away. That was the moment everything inside me started to crumble, because deep down, I finally admitted what I had been too afraid to face. My brother had taken everything from me. The night I finally broke was one I'll never forget. I had come home late from work, exhausted and drained, just wanting a quiet evening. But when I walked into the house, the silence was different, too still, too heavy. I called out for Emily, but there was no answer. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, buzzing with a notification. Something about that felt wrong. My heart started pounding as I noticed her shoes missing by the door and Adam's jacket gone too. I told myself it was a coincidence, that maybe they went out to grab something, but deep down I knew better. I drove around for almost an hour, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they hurt. I didn't even know where I was going, just chasing a feeling I didn't want to believe. And then I saw them. Parked behind an old cafe on the edge of town, Adam's car sat there in the dark. I pulled up slowly, every instinct in me screaming to turn around, but I couldn't. My legs were shaking as I walked closer, and through the windshield, I saw them, Emily and Adam, kissing like they didn't have a care in the world. The sight hit me like a knife straight to the chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My world just stopped. Everything I had built, everything I had loved, shattered in that one moment. I didn't confront them. I just stood there, frozen, watching the two people I trusted most destroy me without even knowing I was there. When I finally got back in my car, I felt empty, like something inside me had died. That drive home was the longest of my life. I knew nothing would ever be the same again, no matter how much I wished it could. When I got home that night, I sat in my car for almost an hour, staring at the steering wheel, trying to process what I had just seen. My hands were trembling, my chest tight, my throat burning with anger and heartbreak all at once. I wanted to scream, to destroy something, but all I could do was sit there in silence as the truth sank in. I had been betrayed by the two people I loved most. When I finally walked inside, the house felt like a stranger's home. Every photo, every memory, every little thing suddenly felt fake. I looked around at the life I had built, the love I thought was real, and realized it had all been a lie. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch, staring at the dark, my mind spinning in circles, replaying the image of them together over and over again. By morning, something inside me had changed. The pain was still there, raw and unbearable, but beneath it was a cold clarity. I wasn't going to pretend anymore. When Emily came home later, her hair messy and eyes tired, I asked her where she'd been. She hesitated, then lied straight to my face. I could hear the tremor in her voice as she said she was out running errands. That was it, the final nail. I told her I knew. At first, she denied it, then the tears came, the excuses, the apologies. She said it was a mistake, that she didn't mean for it to happen, that she was confused. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at her, realizing that the woman in front of me wasn't the same person I had married. And in that moment, I knew our marriage was over. When she finally admitted it, it felt like the world went silent. Every sound, every thought just disappeared, replaced by a numb ringing in my ears. She sat there on the couch, crying, begging me to understand, saying she didn't know how it happened, that she was lonely, that Adam had been there for her when I was too busy with work. Every word she said was like another knife twisting deeper into my chest. I wanted to shout, to ask how she could betray me with my own brother, but my voice wouldn't come out. I just stood there, staring at her through a blur of tears I didn't even realize were falling. I remember asking her one question, my voice shaking, "Do you love him?" She didn't answer right away, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. When she finally whispered, "I don't know," something inside me broke completely. I walked out of the room because I couldn't bear to look at her anymore. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air heavy with betrayal and shame. Later, when I confronted Adam, he didn't even try to deny it. He just looked at me with that same smug expression and said, "It just happened, man. You can't control feelings." I almost lost it right there. My hands shook with rage, but I didn't hit him. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But instead, I told him to get out of my house and never come back. He laughed as he left, like none of it mattered. That laugh still echoes in my head sometimes. That was the day I realized my brother wasn't just selfish, he was cruel. And Emily, the woman I loved more than anything, had chosen him over me. The days that followed felt unreal, like I was walking through a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The house that once felt warm and full of life now felt cold and hollow. Emily tried to talk to me, tried to explain herself, but every time I looked at her, all I could see was her and Adam together. Her touch made my skin crawl, her voice made my chest tighten. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, replaying every memory, wondering when it all started, wondering how I missed the signs. The anger and pain inside me twisted into something darker, something like grief. It felt like both of them had died, but their ghosts were still haunting me. My phone buzzed constantly with calls from Adam, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I didn't want to hear his voice, didn't want to listen to his pathetic excuses. I blocked his number eventually, because every message felt like poison. Meanwhile, Emily wouldn't leave. She cried, begged me to forgive her, said she'd end things with him, said she still loved me. But her words meant nothing. Love doesn't survive betrayal like that. One night, she tried to hug me, sobbing that we could start over, but I pulled away. I told her she needed to pack her things and leave by morning. The look in her eyes when I said it, shock, pain, guilt, it almost broke me again, but I couldn't let myself fall for her tears anymore. When she finally left the next day, the silence that followed was deafening. I stood by the window, watching her drive away, realizing that in one cruel twist, I had lost my wife, my brother, and my faith in family all at once. After Emily left, the house became a graveyard of memories I couldn't escape. Her scent still lingered on the pillows. Her clothes were gone, but her presence haunted every corner. I would walk into a room and feel like she had just been there, like a ghost whispering through the silence. I tried to distract myself with work, with anything that could pull me away from the pain, but no matter what I did, it followed me. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring into the darkness, replaying every moment of our relationship, every laugh, every promise, every time she looked at me and said she loved me. All of it felt like a cruel joke now. Sometimes I'd think about Adam and feel this burning rage rise up inside me. My own brother, the person I defended my entire life, the person I helped when no one else would, had stabbed me in the back in the worst possible way. He didn't just betray me, he destroyed everything I had. Part of me wanted revenge, to make him feel the same pain I was drowning in, but another part of me was just tired. I didn't even have the strength to hate anymore. My parents noticed the change in me. My mom called every day, worried, asking why Adam wasn't answering his phone. I didn't tell her at first. I couldn't. How could I explain that her precious son had torn our family apart? But secrets have a way of coming out. When she and my dad eventually learned the truth, everything exploded. The anger, the disappointment, the heartbreak, it tore through the entire family like wildfire. And for the first time in his life, Adam couldn't talk his way out of it. He was finally exposed for who he truly was. When my parents found out what Adam had done, it was like watching their world collapse. My mother broke down in tears, clutching her chest as if she could physically feel the pain of his betrayal. My father just sat there, silent and pale, staring at the floor for a long time before finally saying, "He's not my son anymore." I had never heard that tone in his voice before, cold, final, heartbroken. My parents had always believed Adam could do no wrong. They forgave him for everything, every lie, every failure, every time he disappointed them. But this was too far. Betraying his own brother, sleeping with my wife, it was unforgivable. When they called him to confront him, he didn't even sound remorseful. He said it wasn't his fault, that things just happened, as if he were the victim. That made my father explode. He yelled so loud the phone nearly cracked in his hand, telling Adam he was dead to him. My mother couldn't even speak. She just cried quietly, whispering my name as if trying to make sense of how everything had fallen apart. I stood there, listening, torn between pain and a twisted sense of justice. For once, Adam couldn't charm his way out of the mess he made. He was finally facing the consequences of his own selfishness. But instead of satisfaction, all I felt was exhaustion. My parents told me they were proud of how I handled it, how I stayed strong, but they didn't see the truth. I wasn't strong. I was shattered, barely holding myself together. That night, my mom said, "He's brought shame to this family," and I realized something painful. The brother I grew up with, the one I once loved and protected, was gone forever, replaced by a stranger I could never forgive. After my parents disowned Adam, the silence in the family became heavier than ever. My mom tried to keep herself busy, but I could see the sadness in her eyes every time Adam's name came up. My dad, on the other hand, refused to talk about him at all. He buried himself in work and pretended Adam didn't exist. It was like we had erased him from our lives, but the pain of what he'd done still lingered in every conversation we didn't have. For me, it was complicated. Part of me was relieved that my parents finally saw his true colors, but another part of me still felt guilty. He was my brother, after all, and no matter how much I hated him, there was still a piece of me that wished things had been different. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering what he was doing, if he felt any regret, or if he was still with Emily. The thought made me sick, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. My parents started spending more time with me after everything happened. They'd invite me over for dinner, talk to me like they were afraid to lose me too. I appreciated it, but every time we sat at that table, I could feel the ghost of what our family used to be. The laughter, the warmth, it was all gone. My mom cried one night, saying, "I don't understand how he could do this to you." I didn't have an answer. Some people are just born selfish, I guess. Still, deep down, I couldn't help feeling like part of this was my fault. I had given Adam everything: trust, love, support, and he turned it into a weapon against me. No matter how hard I tried to move on, his shadow was still everywhere, haunting what was left of my peace. After the confrontation with Adam and the revelation of everything he had done, I realized that I needed to take control of my life in a way I never had before. My marriage was over, my brother had betrayed me, and the family I had known had been shattered. I spent days going through my apartment, packing up the little things that reminded me of Emily, burning bridges with the past I had trusted so blindly. Each item I threw into boxes carried a memory, a piece of hope, and every time I shut the lid, I felt a small release of the weight that had been crushing me. I knew I couldn't stay there, surrounded by reminders of betrayal and lies. The next morning, I found a small, quiet apartment downtown. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I unpacked slowly, carefully placing things around the room as if arranging my life itself, piece by piece. Every wall, every corner, became a statement. This is my space now, my life, and no one else has control over it. I started going for long walks in the evenings, listening to music that matched the storm inside me, letting the rhythm of the city calm the chaos in my head. Work became a refuge. I buried myself in projects, deadlines, and tasks, focusing on things I could control instead of the chaos caused by those I had trusted. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself, not the person I was before all of this, but a stronger, wiser version who had seen the depths of betrayal and survived. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of peace. It was fragile, yes, but it was mine. And I knew that as long as I held on to it, nothing, not Adam, not Emily, not even my shattered past, could take it away from me. After settling into my new apartment and starting to reclaim my life, I realized that the battle with Adam wasn't over yet. Even though my parents had disowned him and Emily was out of my life, there was still unfinished business that demanded attention. I couldn't let him get away with the destruction he had caused, not just to me, but to the entire family dynamic. My first step was to ensure that Emily and Adam could no longer manipulate or pressure anyone else. I contacted a lawyer to understand my rights regarding Emily's pregnancy, knowing that legally and morally, the situation was no longer my responsibility, but I needed clarity and closure. The days were long, filled with calls, emails, and paperwork, but each small step gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. I started setting boundaries with my parents, making sure they were clear that while I appreciated their support, the decisions regarding Adam and Emily were mine to handle. Surprisingly, they listened. My father, who had always been stoic, even gave me advice on how to protect myself emotionally and financially, reminding me that while betrayal cuts deep, reclaiming your own life is the ultimate victory. Meanwhile, Adam was frantic, calling and messaging anyone he thought might help him, but I ignored every attempt. I realized that his panic and desperation were exactly what he deserved after the choices he had made. Slowly, life began to regain a sense of normalcy. I focused on work, exercise, and friends who truly cared, rebuilding my confidence and self-respect piece by piece. Every step forward reminded me that I didn't need Adam or Emily to define my happiness. The pain of betrayal was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but for the first time, I felt empowered rather than defeated. I had survived the storm, and now I was finally learning to live for myself. As the months passed, my relationship with my parents began to heal in ways I hadn't expected. The tension that had hung over our family like a dark cloud slowly started to lift, replaced by cautious but genuine warmth. My dad, who had always been reserved and stoic, began inviting me to spend time with him outside the house, and we started going golfing every weekend. Those mornings on the green, away from phones, emails, and the shadow of Adam and Emily, became a sanctuary. We talked about everything, from work to life lessons, and sometimes just laughed like we hadn't in years. It was a strange but comforting change, seeing my father treat me more like a friend than a son, valuing my opinions and laughing at my jokes without reservation. My mother, though still quietly grieving the loss of Adam from her life, stayed away from any discussion about him. She learned to redirect her energy toward building a closer relationship with me, apologizing softly for all the time she had failed to protect me when I was a child. Her acknowledgement, even after all these years, was a balm to wounds I hadn't realized were still open. Despite this progress, I remained vigilant, knowing that Adam's shadow could return at any moment. But for the first time, I felt a sense of safety and belonging in my own family, one that wasn't overshadowed by betrayal or manipulation. I focused on my work, poured energy into friendships that mattered, and even started exploring hobbies I had neglected for years. Slowly, I began to rebuild not just my life, but my trust in people who genuinely cared about me. It was a quiet, steady process, but each small victory, the laughter with my dad, the supportive conversations with my mom, the sense of independence, reminded me that life could still be meaningful, even after unimaginable heartbreak. By this point, Adam had completely burned his bridges with everyone who had once cared for him, and the consequences of his actions were finally catching up to him. I had ignored all his calls and messages for months, but word of his struggles reached me through family and mutual friends. Apparently, he had been desperately trying to reach my parents, begging for forgiveness and assistance, but they had shut him out completely. Even my mother, who had once caved to his tantrums and excuses, refused to let him back into her life. It was both satisfying and surreal to witness someone who had tormented me for years finally facing the fallout of his own decisions. I heard that he had dropped out of college because he couldn't afford the fees without our father's support. The once privileged golden child now had to navigate the world on his own, facing responsibilities and hardships he had never known. He had taken for granted the love and resources of our family, assuming they would always be there to bail him out, and now he was confronted with the harsh reality that life doesn't come with a safety net for the reckless and selfish. Meanwhile, I continued to focus on rebuilding my life. My relationship with my parents strengthened as we spent more quality time together, and I found comfort in my independence. I also focused on work and personal growth, finally feeling a sense of control over my own future. I couldn't deny a part of me felt a pang of guilt whenever I thought of Adam struggling, but I reminded myself that he had chosen this path. Every misstep he had taken, every betrayal he had committed, had led him here. And while his downfall was painful to witness in some ways, it also reinforced the importance of setting boundaries, protecting myself, and never letting someone like him undermine my life again. As life began to settle into a more stable rhythm, I realized that my own personal growth and healing were accelerating in ways I hadn't anticipated. The divorce from Emily, as painful as it had been, left me with a newfound sense of freedom and autonomy. For the first time since I had married so young, I could make decisions for myself without worrying about someone else's lies or manipulations dictating my life. I immersed myself in work, dedicating long hours to projects and responsibilities that challenged me and gave me purpose. Each completed task, each recognition from my colleagues, reminded me that I was capable, independent, and strong. Socially, I began reconnecting with friends I had drifted from during my marriage, and I discovered the simple joy of being around people who truly valued and supported me without ulterior motives. Weekends became my own, filled with walks, exercise, reading, and exploring parts of the city I had never experienced before. The independence felt invigorating, almost intoxicating at times, as I learned to savor my own company and rebuild my identity apart from family drama and betrayal. Meanwhile, Adam's absence from our lives was a constant, quiet reminder of the choices he had made and the consequences he was enduring. Hearing from distant relatives that he was struggling to keep a job or manage basic responsibilities brought a mix of emotions: satisfaction that he could no longer harm me, sorrow that he had fallen so far, and a reinforced understanding that people shape their own fates through their actions. I also began attending therapy regularly, unpacking years of suppressed anger, hurt, and betrayal, learning not only to process these emotions but also to reclaim my confidence and sense of worth. Every session reminded me that healing isn't linear, but each step forward, no matter how small, was a triumph. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my life, my happiness, and my future, and the dark shadow of Ada. A few weeks ago, my dad called me with news that both surprised and reassured me. He was seriously considering changing his will to ensure that Adam would receive nothing from the estate. My father had always been stubborn and decisive, but this time, I could tell it came from a place of long-simmering anger and disappointment. After everything Adam had done, the betrayal, the lies, the destruction of trust, my dad finally wanted to make sure that his hard-earned assets, retirement funds, and life savings, which totaled nearly $2 million, would go to someone who had proven themselves responsible and trustworthy. I listened as my dad explained the plan. The entire inheritance would go to me, with the only condition being that my mother could continue living in the family home until her final days. This was perfectly fine with me, as I wanted to care for her and ensure she remained comfortable. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. After years of Adam being the golden child, it seemed that finally, the consequences of his selfish actions were catching up to him. Unsurprisingly, Adam somehow found out about this potential change and, desperate and panicked, reached out to me directly, pleading for help. He explained that he was struggling with college fees, that Emily had been pressuring him for child support, and that he had no way to make ends meet. Listening to his words, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. After everything he had done, after betraying me and destroying our family, he had the audacity to ask for my assistance. I reminded him firmly that he should have thought about the consequences before sleeping with my wife and ruining our family. He tried to argue that Emily was partly to blame, and while I acknowledged that, I made it crystal clear that his problems were now entirely his responsibility. Adam began to cry and plead, but I remained resolute, telling him we were done and that he should never contact me again. It was a moment of F. Over the past 5 months, my life has settled into a rhythm I never thought I'd experience after everything with Adam and Emily. My relationship with my parents has grown stronger and healthier than it has in years, built on mutual respect, honesty, and understanding. Weekends are no longer filled with tension or resentment. Instead, I spend quality time with my dad, golfing, joking, and talking about life in a way that feels more like friendship than parent-child hierarchy. Those hours on the green have become a sanctuary, a place where I can unwind, feel supported, and simply enjoy being myself without the shadows of past betrayals looming over me. My mother, though she still misses Adam, has stayed away from him entirely, honoring the boundaries we collectively established. She has apologized for not protecting me sooner, and our relationship has quietly deepened in the wake of everything that happened. I've refrained from discussing Adam with my parents, and they've respected that choice, which has allowed all of us to heal without unnecessary confrontation or reminders of the past. Adam, on the other hand, has fully faced the consequences of his actions. I've heard through family and friends that he's been struggling financially, eventually dropping out of college, and taking a part-time job as a mechanic. He and Emily are raising Henry together, and while I feel no obligation to be involved, I acknowledge that at least the child has some stability. Professionally, I've been thriving, recently receiving a promotion that significantly increased my income and boosted my confidence. Personally, I've remained single, knowing I need time to heal and rebuild trust in myself and others. I've also continued therapy, working through years of betrayal, anger, and pain, slowly learning to let go of resentment and focus on my own growth. Life is far from perfect, but for the first time in a long time, I feel genuinely in control, resilient, and hopeful about the future.